There are plenty of weed strains out there with tough, aggressive names, and most of the time it's just marketing. A scary name slapped on some ordinary bud to make it sound harder than it really is. But every now and then, a name actually means something. And the most famous example is a cannabis strain named after the deadliest rifle ever made, that turned out to be one of the most refined, complex, and beloved strains in all of weed. This is the story of AK-47. So let's start with the strain itself, because the first surprise is how it makes you feel. AK-47 is a sativa-dominant hybrid, which means it leans toward that energetic, heady, uplifting side, but with just enough of a relaxing body element to keep it balanced. It came out of that legendary Amsterdam cannabis scene in the early 1990s, specifically around 1992, and it shot straight up to benchmark status, mentioned in the same breath as the other all-time greats. What made it stand out was a rare combination, a genuinely complex flavor, a powerful high that lasted a really long time, and on top of all that, it had a consistency that made growers absolutely fall in love with it. It was one of those rare strains that both the smokers and the growers could agree on. But that powerful high is actually where the whole name comes from. Because despite what you'd assume, AK-47 wasn't named after the rifle to seem violent or scary. It got the name because it hits you like one shot, and you're done. The breeder nicknamed it the one-hit wonder, since it was so strong that back in the Amsterdam coffee shops, first-time smokers would famously take a single pull and get completely floored. So the name is really all about raw potency, the idea that this strain is as powerful as a gunshot. But that's only in terms of strength. In terms of how it actually makes you feel, it's smooth and mellow. Now, I do want to be honest about that name for a second, because there's a story you'll see all over the internet. A lot of people claim the breeder deeply regretted the name and hated the gun association. And the truth is, that specific claim just isn't backed up by anything he actually said. What he did say is simply that the name was about the knockout potency, not about violence, which is a very different thing from regret. So rather than repeat a myth, here's the fair way to put it. The name was a bit of provocative branding. It pointed to the strength, and it absolutely helped make the strain unforgettable. There are even a couple of other theories floating around, like the idea that the AK stands for Afghan Kush. But that potency explanation is the one that comes straight from the source. So who actually made this thing? That would be a Dutch breeder known as Simon, founder of Serious Seeds. And Simon's background is honestly pretty unusual for a weed legend. He studied biology, and for years he didn't even smoke, because over in the Netherlands, weed is usually mixed with tobacco. It wasn't until he was traveling through Africa in the 1980s that he tried pure cannabis for the first time, completely fell in love with it, and started collecting genetics from all over the world. That scientific, collector's kind of mindset is exactly what led him to build something as complex as a K-47. He wasn't just growing weed. He was treating the whole thing like a serious craft. He built his company, Serious Seeds, around that exact same mindset. While other seed banks were pumping out dozens and dozens of different strains, Simon went the opposite way, keeping his lineup tiny, just a small handful of perfected classics that he stood behind completely. A K-47 became the crown jewel of that little collection, the strain the whole company was known for. In fact, he was so protective of it that he trademarked the name, and then spent years battling copycats who kept trying to rip it off with cheap imitations. To Simon, the real AK-47 was something worth defending. And a big part of what made it worth defending was its recipe, which is famously a secret. Simon has always flat out refused to reveal the exact genetics, comparing it to the closely guarded formula for Coca-Cola. But he did give up the basic building blocks, and they're remarkable. AK-47 is a blend of landrace strains from 4 different parts of the world. You've got Colombian, Mexican, and Thai on the energetic sativa side, all combined with a hearty Afghani indica. And blending 4 of them together like that was a genuinely ambitious move. Because, see, most strains out there are just a simple cross between 2 parents. But AK-47 mixed sativas from 3 different continents with a sturdy indica, all into one single plant. That's exactly what gave it such a deep, complex character, taking the soaring, worldly flavors of those equatorial sativas and grounding them with the resin, the density, and the fast finish of that Afghani. It was like a greatest hits album of global cannabis, all rolled into one strain. And pulling that off, getting that many different genetics into one stable, reliable plant, was no small feat. So what did all that careful breeding actually taste and feel like, you may ask? And the truth is, it produced a genuinely special smoke. A K-47 delivers a high that's the best of both worlds. It has an uplifting, cerebral, creative buzz that also relaxes your body and, crucially, lasts a long time. And the aroma it has is something else entirely. It hits you with this sour, earthy, floral smell, driven largely by terpenes like myrcene and caryophyllene, which give it that distinctive spicy, woody, almost funky edge with just a hint of something sweet underneath. It was also seriously potent for its era. At one major competition back in 1999, it tested at over 21% THC, the highest of any entry there that year. Add all of that together, and you had a strain that stood out from everything else on the menu. But there was another reason growers loved it, and it's a big part of why it spread everywhere. Simply put, AK-47 was a joy to grow. It was tough, it was reliable, it finished in around 53 to 63 days, which is fast for a sativa, and it produced dense, resin-covered, trichome-heavy buds you could count on. When you grew AK-47, you knew exactly what you were going to get, every single time. And that kind of consistency is pure gold to a grower. It made the strain a favorite not just with people smoking it, but with other breeders hunting for a dependable foundation to build on. A reliable plant, after all, is the perfect starting point for making brand new ones. And all of that quality showed up in one very crowded trophy case, because AK-47 became one of the most awarded strains in the entire history of cannabis. By its creator's own count, it's pulled in somewhere around 24 different awards over the decades. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of those were high placings rather than straight first place wins, so you'll sometimes see that number get exaggerated online. But even the honest version is staggering. It even managed something almost unheard of, winning an award as a sativa one year, and then years later, winning all over again while being judged as an indica. That right there tells you just how perfectly balanced its genetics are. And on top of all that, it was even crowned a Plant of the Year back in 2003. But now we come to the biggest claim of all, and the real reason this strain is such a legend: its influence as a parent. And I want to be straight with you here, because the internet absolutely loves to exaggerate this stuff. You will hear people say AK-47 is behind half the strains in existence, and honestly, that is more of a catchy line than a hard fact. But what is completely true is that AK-47 is a genuine genetic cornerstone, a foundational strain that breeders have used to create hundreds of documented descendants. Its DNA really is spread far and wide across the modern hybrid world. Because when a strain is that reliable and that potent, breeders naturally reach for it again and again. The most famous example of that is a strain called White Russian. That one is simply AK-47 crossed with White Widow, two absolute legends combined into a single plant. It was even celebrated at legendary Amsterdam spots like De Dampkring coffee shop, and it was so strong that it was once called the most powerful weed in the world, going on to win its own cannabis cup. So AK-47 did not just win trophies itself, it created children that won trophies too. Simon even used it to upgrade another one of his own classics, breeding AK-47 into his strain Chronic to give it a richer, more complex high. And beyond that, countless other seed makers have used AK-47 as a base for their own creations, which is exactly why you see the letters AK in so many strain names out there. But being honest also means clearing up what AK-47 did not create, because a lot of famous strains get wrongly credited to it. For example, plenty of people just assume the mega-popular Gorilla Glue must come from AK-47, but it doesn't. It's got a completely different American lineage. And the same goes for the classic Jack Herer and the super citrusy Tangy. Those are all their own totally separate family trees. So while AK-47's real influence is genuinely huge, it's important not to just hand it the credit for every great strain out there. Its real family tree is impressive enough without the exaggerations. So where does AK-47 stand today, after all these years? It's still going strong. Serious Seeds still sells the original, still guards that secret recipe, and the strain still carries near universal name recognition. And over the years, Simon has kept right on refining and tweaking it, which means AK-47 is best thought of not as some frozen relic from the past, but as a living, evolving classic that's been carefully maintained for over 30 years now. It remains one of the defining strains of that golden 1990s era, sitting right alongside the other legends that shaped everything that came after. So, at the end of the day, AK-47 is proof that you really shouldn't judge a strain by its name. Behind that aggressive, weaponized branding is one of the most refined, complex, and influential plants in all of cannabis history. It took landrace genetics from 4 corners of the globe and blended them into something greater. It racked up an incredible trophy count, and it became a foundational building block that lives on in countless strains today. It's a mellow, sophisticated legend, hiding behind the name of a gun,